Hi, everybody. We thought we'd do a quick take on a recent order that was passed by the Punjab and Haryana High Court. The order was what's called a protection order, where a married couple or an unmarried couple approaches the High Court seeking protection from state authorities. The order caused a substantial amount of controversy on social media because the judge effectively denied protection to this unmarried couple. He went on to note that if such protection is granted, the entire social fabric of society would be disturbed. So we thought we'd take a couple of minutes to just go over what um, protection orders are, what the issues with them are, and then circle back to the observations of the judge. So I'm not a practicing lawyer, but Rishabh practices in the Punjab and Haryana High Court. So he can give us some unique insights into what exactly protection orders are. So, Rishabh, could you just quickly walk us through what Section 482 of the CRPC is and how it deals with protection orders?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so before we start, I think we all know that it's not like the greatest order ever passed. And it was a huge Twitter storm. So it was quite fun to see what reactions were there. But there is a lot of layers to this order. Like, even though it's just like 6 lines, maybe, there's a lot of layers to this order, which are very interesting to look at. So, firstly, we should see what really are protection matters, right? Like Vasu just said. So, either they file under 482, which is basically the inherent power of the High Court, which you want what you want actually is the police to protect you from a certain action, or you come under Article 21, which turns out to be a criminal writ petition, which is protection of life and liberty. There you come out and say that there is a danger to my life because we are a couple and we have usually married against the wishes of our parents, therefore give us protection. So this protection sounds very fancy, right? I think that's the whole thing with this. Protection sounds like one of the greatest ideas of what this protection is doing.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly sounds like something that is necessary in a society like India, where, say, parents regularly file criminal cases against unmarried couples or married couples who have eloped to sort of bring them back under the control of their parents. So having a relief where I can approach a court, especially a high court, and say that, no, protect me from my own parents because they aren't accepting my marriage, certainly has a lot of appeal to it, one would think.
Yeah.
But what does a protection order actually do? So once I get an order from the High Court saying that I'm granted protection and it's directed, like you said, to the state authorities, what does that mean?
Yeah, so this is actually very interesting because I remember once I joined practice and I used to see these protection orders a lot. And I used to ask like the seniors or my colleagues, what is protection? Like, what does it mean? I remember nobody could explain it to me. They're like, oh, it's just protection. But like, what is protection? So after asking, I think, various people, someone finally told me that once you file for protection and you're granted protection, which is actually just a 5-second hearing, usually, you stand up and you say, my lord, protection, and he grants you protection. So a letter is sent to the local SHO saying that this couple has either run away. We are assuming it's a married couple. This married couple is run away and they're married against their parents' wishes. So protect them. So it's not that someone will come outside your house and start protecting you. It's just that information has been given to the local police station. Now, the interesting bit is that why do you need this police on your side? Because usually what they're assuming is that a parent will be actually better placed in the society to file a FIR against you. So what they'll do is they'll file an FIR stating that the boy has actually seduced the girl and he has kidnapped the girl or he's raping her, stuff like that, to put pressure on the boy and to break this marriage. So now this protection order by the High Court is actually acting like a proof of the genuinity of the marriage. So when you go to the local SHO saying that, file an FIR, he'll just say, I have this protection order. What do I do with this? This clearly shows that they're married. So all of your claims go out of the window. So I think that's a very interesting.
Right. So what you're saying is that the protection order is not really to grant physical protection so much. It's more along the lines of creating a sort of legal impediment to parents or other relatives who might seek to file FIRs against this couple, saying that, say, the boys kidnapped the girl or along those lines, right?
Correct. But like you said, like this is then the hesitation then. Because now what you're actually doing is you're asking the court to approve your marriage, which I think is the trouble that the court feels when passing such orders. So So it's a
Right. Right. So it's right before we started this discussion, you actually sent me another protection order by the Punjab and Haryana High Court. So I thought that's super interesting, and it sort of reflects this hesitation and this um, judicial sanctification of marriage or judicial recognition of marriage.
yeah.
So maybe I'll just read out a couple of lines from that, and then you can explain to me what the judge is really talking about.
Yeah.
So in that case,
Yeah.
also.
Sorry,
Sorry, yeah, go for it.
I just once again. So the interesting bit is this order was actually passed prior to the order. So there are two orders. One was this Justice Kshetrapal's order, which became famous everywhere. This was passed on 12th May. Then there's this Justice Madan's order, which we'll discuss just now. It was actually passed on 11th May. So it was passed prior to Kshetrapal's order, Justice Kshetrapal's order. I'm sorry. So it's not a precedent. So the thing is, once one order got public and it got this bad press, the second order also came out, and then this order is also there. Like it's not like a one-off thing that Justice Kshetrapal has done. There are various orders like this that are coming out.
Right, right. And I think that also, like, it goes to the sheer number of volume of cases that are filed under this provision, right? So I mean, based on your experience in the High Court, how often or how regular is protection sought under 482, and like on an average day, say even if it's a miscellaneous day in the High Courts, how common is a protection order?
Yeah, so see, once we start, like you just asking this question, once you start putting these questions out, you start to see what's happening in protection matters. So I think like a very conservative guess would be on an average, maybe I see 60 protection matters. And those protection matters, once you start seeing them, you start seeing a pattern in those protection matters. So what happens is there's this interfaith couple, or not even interfaith, there's just a couple which may or may be marrying against their parents. They are very young usually. They are maybe 18, 19, 20, 21, around that age bracket. They get married. As soon as they get married, they come to the High Court seeking protection. And it's like a one-day thing, and the High Court usually grants it. So then you start seeing that why are there so many couples like this, right? Like what's happening in Punjab and Haryana? And then there are various orders that point to this fact that actually this is a whole scam. Because what you do is these a couple say we want to get married, they go to a mandir or they go to any religious place and they say we want to get married. The pandit says, okay, I'll take X money, I'll get you married without your parents being around, and I'll also get you protection from the High Court. So they only suggest you a lawyer, and they only suggest you this protection, the idea of protection, that your parents may actually trouble you. So you actually need protection. And then they come to the High Court. So that's very important. It's like, imagine a judge doing 60 protection matters in a day, every day. So that's a huge burden on a judge. And he starts questioning his use of his constitutional powers for that matter. He's a constitutional court. And he's like, protection is important, but sheer volume of cases starts making it a farce. I think that's it.
Right. So what you're saying is that it's not so much a case of parties who are potentially aggrieved or at actual risk, but it's more a pro forma thing that everybody who gets married, not obviously everybody who gets married in Punjab and Haryana, but it's a regular part where the people who are getting you married, whether it's a pandit or any other religious authority, automatically suggests that you go to the High Court, and the judge really doesn't have the time to look into whether or not there's an actual risk to these parties, because they're just coming at him in droves. And everybody who marries in, say, a particular temple under a particular pandit is being sent to get a protection order from the High Court, basically.
And this has actually snowballed into a much larger problem. I think Vasu and I were discussing before this actually we started recording, is that what happens is, because there's an order of, so it's a young couple, right? They're maybe 21, 19, and they might not be sure about their marriage, and they, after a certain point, after 6 months or 7 months, they want to split, which is natural. Like anybody can split whenever they want to, right? So now they go and file a divorce, or now they actually go and start complaining about maybe marital rape, or this complain about domestic violence. Then what happens is, then the opposite side, usually, so it's usually basically the female is filing for these cases, and usually the men in the case come out and show the protection order. And they say, this is a proof of our marriage. And our marriage was genuine. I did not seduce you. I did not rape you. We were married and nothing has happened. You are now under the pressure of your parents and doing all of this. So then this becomes a huge problem, because now even if the girl has withdrawn her consent, there's this High Court order that is against her. So that's the problem. I think that's why judges are very wary of now are getting very like scared to pass these orders because they know a larger impact of this. And a fun, interesting story is I've seen judges passing an order saying that I'll grant you protection, but you actually deposit certain amount of money in the girl's favor in a bank account. And that would be like a fixed deposit in her name. So that if something goes off between you guys, it's not that she's left high and dry, right? So there's some kind of protection. And I've seen that. And it's an interesting take on the whole situation because a judge has to maybe look at various other things that he's doing, right? And I think that's where now this question of live-in comes into being, which I think we were discussing this Justice Madan's order, which I think we'll just read.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, right. So I was just going to read that out, and I thought that was also interesting. It's a equally questionable order, but I thought that what's interesting is that he notes that the exact language he uses is the petitioners in the garb of filing the present protection petition are seeking approval of their live-in relationship, right? So and then he goes on to talk about how live-in relationships are not morally and socially acceptable.
Correct.
But let's put that side because we know that's problematic right off the bat. Yeah. But let's talk about what he's talking about is that the parties seeking the protection order are basically seeking judicial recognition of their marriage, right? Or not even their marriage, their relationship. Yeah. Right. And like you said, this has a lot of knock-on effects. Because tomorrow, this judicial recognition of the relationship can be used in several ways, right? And one obviously like sort of overarching looming problem we have in India is that marital rape is still not criminalized, correct, right? So automatically, once you say that the judicial recognition of this particular relationship, and if it's a marriage, right, you automatically are the judge is potentially stamping, right, a permanent sort of transference of agency from the woman with respect to sexual intercourse, right? So that this protection order, even though it might seem small, has significant impact down the line.
Exactly. I think that's the huge problem. So if we read this order, so it gives a very interesting insight of what's happening. So this order reasoning is actually in two parts. One is the petitioners in the garb of filing the present petition are seeking a seal of approval of their live-in relationship, which is the first part, which has maybe some kind of logic behind it, which has like a judicial logic behind it. And then the second part is, which is morally and socially not acceptable, and no protection order in the petition can be passed. So then the second part of the order actually starts getting you to what the judge is actually thinking. Like this is his bias that comes out. And this is, I think, the problematic part, because basically a judge has to balance both sides. No, he can't pass an order completely questioning live-in relationships. Once we know that they've been approved by the Supreme Court, it's a very common thing. You have to allow it. But he might look at the bigger picture, but his bias just comes straight off the bat, right? Like we're talking about. His bias is quite visible here, and which we'll just discuss is also like not as per the Constitution. Like the Constitution allows you to make these choices, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I think that really goes to the heart of it, because the backlash against the order, right, that Justice Kshetrapal passed was really going to that question of sort of the individual autonomy and the ability of individuals to make free choices to live together, right? So we say that individuals have decisional autonomy, right to privacy against particular state actions, and et cetera. So that's the intuitive reaction that people have, right? That this order immediately contravenes all those principles, and effectively the state is passing a value judgment on private decisions that people are making. And I think that's entirely justified, because like you said, it's coming not from anything to do with the protection order, exactly, right? It's not coming from is the person at risk or not, right? It's coming purely from the individual judge's opinion on the validity of a particular relationship. Yeah. But like we've just discussed, there is a huge structural problem with protection orders itself. So it's potentially valid for judges to not want to grant protection in certain cases, especially where it may be abused later on. Yeah.
Right? But I think the interesting then part is the amount of time it takes. You know, if you have 60 cases of protection in a day, you want to finish them off because you want to get to other judicial work. There are bails you have to hear. There are maybe habeas corpus cases that you have to hear. So you don't want to spend so much time on these cases, to the effect that I remember there was this order by Justice Haryana just before he was retiring, saying that this protection matters are actually wasting judicial time. And I remember he was stating that these matters should actually go to someone else. or not, and not the High Court. It's not the High Court's job to start giving you protection at every point of time, which is correct. Because at some point we realize that there are obviously relationships which are not approved by the society and which need protection, like live-ins or LGBTQ relationships. But there are also this huge structural problem that is actually stopping the people who really need the protection to get it. Because now you flooded the court with the litigation that is not necessary by the end of it.
Yeah. And I think my sort of last thought on this entire thing is, when we said we'd do a quick take on protection orders and that particular order by the Punjab and Haryana High Court, I just sort of did a quick online search to figure out, because I'm not a practicing lawyer, I was not even familiar with what protection orders are. But all the reporting I found made it seem like the court was genuinely granting protection, actual meaningful protection, to parties in, say, interfaith, intercaste situations. And this was like a very, very noble achievement on behalf of the
Mecca
court,
of the Constitution. Right? Like they're upholding the Mecca of the Constitution, like that.
Yeah, exactly, right? And after speaking to you, when we had this little chat, it sort of made me realize that there's a lot more going on under the surface, right? So when we are very, very quick to jump to say that, okay, the court was right or wrong. And yes, the court was definitely wrong in passing that value judgment, right? Nobody is debating that. But I also think that the sort of narrative where we say that, okay, like protection orders must be passed, right? Why is the court not passing protection orders? Sort of fails to acknowledge the larger structural issue here that's going on in actual courts.
Right? That's a huge problem. Like, we all agree they deserve the protection. There might be some instances. So that's what we discussed before, right? This order, if the judge would have found that, they don't actually, there's no real threat to their life, a different order in a different way could have been passed. But it's not that. So it's not really that they don't need protection. It's something else that's coming out. So, but what guides it? That's a question. So at one point, we all agree they deserve the protection, and there's obviously the autonomy, we cannot stop them, but somebody has to address those structural issues by the end of it. So I think that's broadly a quick take on this whole thing.
We hope that was a quick take. And we hope to see you all in the next episode.
Thank you guys.